The Saturday morning of September 2024 dawned golden in Millbrook, Connecticut, a typical New England town where time seemed to move more slowly than in the rest of the world. Eleanor Patterson, 87, woke up before sunrise, as she had done every day for the past 70 years of her life. Her arthritic fingers trembled slightly as she held the cup of coffee she had prepared, still using the same coffee maker she had bought with Benjamin in 1955. Eleanor was not just any old lady. Behind her faded blue eyes and snow-white hair, there was a story that few in Millbrook still remembered. In the 1950s and 1960s, she and her husband Benjamin Patterson had owned Ben and Ellie's Diner, the beating heart of the town, where 3 generations of families gathered to share meals, celebrations, and the simple moments that define a life. On that special morning, Eleanor made a decision she had been putting off for 5 years. She would return to the place where her old restaurant had once stood. Since Benjamin's death in 2019, she had become increasingly isolated, living alone in the Victorian house they had bought together in 1962, when the diner was thriving and their dreams seemed endless. Eleanor opened the bedroom closet where she kept her most precious memories. Carefully, she took out a small blue velvet box containing the strawberry-shaped brooch Benjamin had given her on the day the diner opened. "For the woman who makes the best strawberry milkshake on the East Coast," he had said, kissing her on the cheek as she cried with emotion. The brooch had become the unofficial symbol of Ben and Ellie's Diner. Eleanor had worn it every day during the 18 years they ran the restaurant, and customers knew that when they saw the little golden strawberry shining on her apron, the famous milkshake would be especially perfect that day. "Today I'll see him for the last time," Eleanor whispered to Benjamin's photo on her bedside table, "and I'll wear your gift." Eleanor dressed with special care. She chose the light blue dress that Benjamin always said brought out her eyes, comfortable black shoes she wore to work at the restaurant, and pinned the strawberry brooch to her lapel in the same place she had always worn it. At 87, she still had the elegant bearing and natural dignity that had made her one of the most respected women in Millbrook for decades. The walk to the town center took 40 minutes. Eleanor could have asked her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, to drive her, but she wanted to make the journey the same way she had in the 1960s, when she walked from her house to work every morning, greeting neighbors and watching the town wake up. Millbrook had changed, but not completely. Victorian houses still lined the tree-lined streets, century-old oak trees still provided generous shade, and the Methodist church still rang its bells every hour. But there were new businesses, different cars, faces Eleanor didn't recognize. Time had continued its course while she hid in her memories. When she reached 2447 Main Street, Eleanor stopped on the sidewalk and took a deep breath. There was the building where she and Benjamin had built their dreams. The original red brick structure remained intact, but everything else had changed. Where once the neon sign Ben and Ellie's Diner had shone with a small flashing milkshake, there was now a modern brushed steel sign. Fusion Eats, Contemporary Cuisine. Eleanor touched the strawberry brooch unconsciously. "Well, Benjamin," she whispered, "let's see what they've done to our place." The first thing Eleanor noticed upon entering was the silence. Ben and Ellie's Diner had always been a place of laughter, lively conversation, and the familiar clatter of plates and cutlery. Now the atmosphere was solemn, almost reverential, with soft electronic music and dramatic lighting that created more shadows than light. The old red vinyl booths had been replaced by minimalist lightwood tables. The original counter, where Eleanor used to prepare her famous milkshakes while chatting with customers, had been removed to make way for a sophisticated cocktail bar. The walls, which once displayed photos of the local community and memorabilia from the 1950s, now featured expensive abstract art and hanging plants. "Can I help you?" asked a young waitress of about 22 with pink-dyed hair and multiple piercings. Her badge read Skylar Server. She looked at Eleanor with a mixture of curiosity and impatience, clearly wondering what an elderly lady was doing there. "Yes, dear," Eleanor said with a gentle smile. "I'd like to order a strawberry milkshake, please." Skylar blinked, confused. A milkshake? Ma'am, we don't serve milkshakes here. This is Fusion Eats. We have artisanal smoothies, detox drinks, cold-pressed juices." "Oh," Eleanor felt her heart sink. "But couldn't you make a simple milkshake? Just vanilla ice cream, milk, strawberry syrup." It was this place's specialty. Another employee approached, a bearded young man of about 28 named Tyler, according to his name tag. He had overheard the conversation and looked amused. "Ma'am," Tyler said with a condescending smile, "this isn't a 1950s museum. We're a contemporary restaurant. Our customers are looking for healthy, modern options." Eleanor felt her face flush. "I understand that you have a different concept, but I thought maybe I can offer you an organic strawberry acai smoothie," Skylar interrupted, clearly wanting to end the situation. "It's our closest option. Or we have a vegan red berry protein shake." Tyler chuckled softly. "Or she could go to McDonald's if she wants a vintage milkshake," he commented to Skylar, thinking Eleanor hadn't heard. But Eleanor heard every word. At 87, her hearing was perfectly clear, as was her understanding of what was happening. She looked around the space that had once been her kingdom, where she had served thousands of meals with love and pride, where she had met people who had become family. "No, thank you," Eleanor said, her voice slightly shaky. "I don't think there's anything here for me." She turned to leave, but Skylar called after her. "Ma'am, are you sure? Our smoothies are really good. Instagram-worthy, you know?" Eleanor paused at the door, her hand on the strawberry brooch. For a moment she considered turning around and telling them who she was, explaining that this place had been her home for 18 years, that she had created the strawberry milkshake recipe that had become legendary in Millbrook. But looking at the young, disinterested faces, she realized it wouldn't matter. "I'm sure," she said softly, and left. The walk home seemed to take forever. Eleanor felt invisible, as if she had become a ghost of her own past. With every step, memories of Ben and Ellie's diner came back with painful force. She remembered the day Margaret Thompson, pregnant with her 5th child, had gone into labor right there in booth number 3, and how she and Benjamin had taken care of her until the ambulance arrived. She remembered shy teenager David Miller, who came in every day after school to do his homework at the counter while drinking chocolate milkshakes, and who later became a doctor and saved Benjamin's life during a heart attack in 1985. She remembered the Christmas Eves when they opened the diner for free to those who had nowhere to spend the holiday, the fundraisers for families in need, the first romantic dates they witnessed, the birthdays celebrated, the tears consoled with an extra slice of pie and a fancy milkshake. "We're invisible to them," Eleanor murmured, touching the brooch again. "Our history, our work, our life, all invisible." When she got home, Eleanor sat down in Benjamin's armchair, something she rarely did, and cried for the first time since her husband's funeral. The following days passed in a silent fog. Eleanor barely ate, slept little, and spent hours looking at the photo album of Ben and Ellie's diner that she kept on the coffee table in the living room. The images showed a golden age, her and Benjamin smiling behind the counter, happy customers, children with ice cream on their faces, community celebrations. There was a special photo from 1967 in which Eleanor was wearing the strawberry brooch, preparing a milkshake for a little girl who could barely reach the counter. The girl was Sarah Mitchell, who later became a teacher at the local elementary school and one of Eleanor's best friends. But Sarah had moved to Florida 5 years earlier, and Eleanor had lost touch with almost all of the diner's former customers. "Maybe it's time to go find you, Benjamin," Eleanor said to their favorite photo, taken on the day the diner opened in 1954. "There's no place for me in this world anymore." Eleanor opened the drawer of the coffee table and took out an envelope she had kept for years. Inside was the original recipe for the strawberry milkshake, handwritten on her personal stationery, with her initials embroidered on it. She had promised Benjamin that one day she would pass the recipe on, so that the tradition would continue, but now she realized that no one was interested in traditions. "Recipe for the perfect strawberry milkshake, Ben and Ellie's Diner Special," read the top of the yellowed sheet. "For my dear Benjamin, who said this is the taste of true love. Eleanor, 1954. She placed the recipe next to the photo album, along with the strawberry brooch she had carefully removed from her dress. Michael will know what to do with this, she thought, referring to her grandson who lived in California and visited her once a year. That night, Eleanor took a long bath, put on her prettiest nightgown, and lay down in the bed she had shared with Benjamin for 40 years. She wasn't sick, she felt no physical pain, but her soul was tired of a world that no longer had room for who she was. Eleanor Patterson died in her sleep in the early hours of September 17, 2024, at the age of 87. Next to her bed on the nightstand were the photo album from the diner, the handwritten milkshake recipe, and the small strawberry brooch that glowed softly in the moonlight. Michael Patterson, 32, received a call from the Millbrook police on a Tuesday morning while having breakfast in his apartment in Los Angeles. He worked as a graphic designer for a technology company, and although he loved his grandmother, he recognized that he didn't visit her as often as he should have. "I'm sorry, Mr. Patterson," Officer Rodriguez said. "Your grandmother was found by her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, when she didn't show up for their Tuesday morning coffee. It appears to have been natural in her sleep." Michael took the first flight to Hartford and drove to Millbrook with a heavy heart. During the 2 days he spent organizing Eleanor's funeral and sorting through her belongings, he discovered things about his grandmother he had never imagined. Mrs. Rodriguez, the 68-year-old neighbor who had been informally caring for Eleanor, told Michael about her visit to the old diner. "She came back from there very sad," Mrs. Rodriguez said, with tears in her eyes. "She said they had treated her badly, that they didn't respect her memory. I didn't quite understand, but she was very upset." That's when Michael found the photo album and the milkshake recipe on the nightstand. Leafing through the pages, he saw dozens of images that told a story he had never fully known. His grandmother had not been just a typical 1950s housewife. She had been a businesswoman, a pillar of the community, a person who had touched hundreds of lives. There were photos of Eleanor and Benjamin at the diner's grand opening, with a crowd celebrating. Images of Eleanor preparing milkshakes behind the counter, always wearing her shiny strawberry brooch. Photos of community events held at the diner, of famous customers who had stopped by town, of 3 generations of families who frequented the establishment. "My God," Michael murmured. "She was famous here." That night, unable to sleep, Michael decided to research Ben and Ellie's diner on the internet. He found a few references on local history websites, old articles from the town newspaper, and even a Facebook page called Memories of Old Millbrook, where people occasionally posted old photos of the town. That's when Michael had an idea. Michael Patterson was a talented graphic designer who specialized in telling stories through images. He spent the early hours of the morning crafting a thoughtful post for his personal Instagram account, which had about 15,000 followers thanks to his work in the creative industry. The post began with his favorite photo of Eleanor and Benjamin at the diner's opening, followed by a series of images from the album. Eleanor making milkshakes, the couple smiling behind the counter, happy customers, community events. The text Michael wrote was simple but powerful. "This is my grandmother, Eleanor Patterson, who died yesterday at the age of 87. In the 1950s and 1960s, she and my grandfather, Benjamin, owned Ben and Ellie's Diner in Millbrook, Connecticut. It was the heart of the community, famous for the best strawberry milkshake on the East Coast. Last week, she visited the site of her old restaurant, now called Fusion Eats. She ordered a strawberry milkshake, her original recipe. She was ridiculed by the staff, who said this isn't a 1950s museum, and suggested she go to McDonald's. She died of a broken heart, alone, holding photos of a time when people like her were respected and valued. This is Eleanor Patterson. She built dreams and fed a community for decades, and she was treated like she was nobody. Eleanor Patterson, Ben and Ellie's Diner, Respect Elders, Millbrook, Never Forget." Michael posted the tribute at 3:47 a.m. West Coast time. He didn't expect much of a response. After all, it was just the story of a grandmother most of his followers didn't know. He was wrong. Michael's post slowly began to gain traction. His co-workers shared it, touched by the story. Some design influencers who followed him reposted it on their stories. Within 6 hours, the post had 1,000 likes and 50 comments. But the real boost came when Jessica Morrison, a lifestyle influencer with 2.8 million followers, found the post through a mutual friend. Jessica was 35 years old and often spoke about respect for the elderly and valuing the wisdom of older generations. Jessica reposted Eleanor's story with an emotional comment. "This story broke my heart. How can a society that treats its elderly like this expect to be respected? Eleanor Patterson deserved better. All Eleanors deserve better." Within 12 hours, the story was on all major platforms. TikTok exploded with videos of young people telling similar stories of disrespectful grandparents. Twitter was filled with threads about ageism and the devaluation of older people. Facebook was buzzing with groups of Millbrook residents sharing their own memories of Ben and Ellie's Diner. The hashtags Doc Eleanor Patterson and Ben and Ellie's Diner became national trending topics. The viral story brought to light a network of people who had known Eleanor and Benjamin, but had lost touch over the years. David Miller, the doctor who did his homework at the diner counter as a teenager, now 54 and practicing medicine in Boston, saw the post and immediately drove to Millbrook. "Eleanor saved my life," he posted on Facebook. "When my parents divorced, I was 14 and completely lost. Every day after school I would go to Ben & Ellie's. Eleanor would give me free chocolate milkshakes and let me do my homework at the counter. She and Benjamin were my surrogate parents when I needed them most. Without them, I would never have become a doctor." Margaret Thompson, now 78, shared, "My son was born at Ben & Ellie's diner in 1967. Eleanor and Benjamin helped me until the ambulance arrived. When Johnny was born, Eleanor said he would always have free milkshakes at the diner, and she kept that promise for 18 years, until he left for college." Sarah Mitchell, the former teacher who had moved to Florida, recorded a video crying, "Eleanor was my second mother. When I lost my parents in a car accident in 1975, Eleanor and Benjamin took me in emotionally. They paid for my college, gave me a job at the diner, taught me about responsibility and love. I didn't know she had died. I didn't know she was suffering." Hundreds of similar stories emerged. Ben & Ellie's diner had not just been a restaurant, it had been a community care center, where Eleanor and Benjamin served as counselors, parental figures, and guardian angels to anyone in need. As tributes to Eleanor multiplied online, attention inevitably turned to Fusion Eats. Social media users began identifying the restaurant and posting negative reviews. "This place humiliated a local legend," wrote one Yelp user. "Eleanor Patterson built this community, and you treated her like trash. Expensive food, terrible service, total disrespect for the elderly," posted another. Tyler Morrison, the employee who had suggested Eleanor go to McDonald's, was identified through photos on social media and began receiving hate messages. Skylar, the waitress, had to make her accounts private after being bombarded with negative comments. The owner of Fusion Eats, Marcus Henley, a 41-year-old entrepreneur who had bought the space in 2019, initially tried to ignore the controversy. But when reservations began to be cancelled and protests organized in front of the restaurant, he realized he had a serious problem. "We didn't know who she was," Marcus said in a desperate interview with the local newspaper. "If we had known her story, we would have treated her differently." But the response only made the situation worse. "So you only treat people with respect if they're famous?" replied one viral comment. "All elderly people deserve dignity, regardless of who they were in the past." Marcus Henley tried several strategies to contain the damage. First, he fired Tyler and Skylar, claiming they didn't represent the restaurant's values. Then he announced that he would donate 10% of profits to a local nursing home. Finally, he tried to honor Eleanor by putting a photo of her on the wall and creating an Eleanor Patterson Memorial Strawberry Smoothie on the menu. Nothing worked. The Millbrook community, revived by shared memories online, organized systematic boycotts. Former customers of Ben & Ellie's diner, now scattered across the country, cancelled trips to the town, specifically to avoid giving money to Fusion Eats. 3 weeks after Eleanor's death, the movement had become bigger than the story itself. Sarah Mitchell returned from Florida specifically to lead a historic preservation effort. David Miller organized a fund to buy the building. More than 200 former diner customers contributed financially. In November 2024, Marcus Henley was forced to sell the building for a fraction of what he had paid. Fusion Eats closed its doors on a rainy Tuesday, with only 3 customers present. The next day, a group of volunteers led by Sarah Mitchell and David Miller began working on restoring the space. They had detailed photos of the original Ben & Ellie's diner and were determined to recreate it exactly as it was in the 1960s. In December 2024, 3 months after Eleanor's death, a bronze plaque was installed at the entrance to the restored building. The ceremony attracted more than 500 people, including Michael Patterson, who flew in from California specifically for the event. The plaque read, "Ben & Ellie's Diner, 1954-1972's Diner. 1954-1972, founded by Eleanor and Benjamin Patterson. A place where everyone was treated like family, where milkshakes were made with love and where the community found its heart. Eleanor Patterson, 1937 to 2024. Memory is not mocked, it is respected." During the ceremony, Sarah Mitchell read the original recipe for Eleanor's strawberry milkshake that she had left behind. "This recipe isn't just about ice cream and syrup," she said emotionally. It's about love, care, and the belief that every person deserves a sweet moment in life. David Miller announced that the space would reopen as a non-profit community museum and event center, retaining the original name of Ben and Ellie's Diner. Eleanor and Benjamin believed that this place belonged to the community, he said. Now officially it does. Tyler Morrison, the young man who had mocked Eleanor, watched the sidewalk ceremony from behind a tree. He had lost his job, been driven out of town by social pressure, and now worked at a diner in another town, still carrying the weight of what he had done. Skylar had moved to Vermont, where she found a job as a caregiver in a nursing home. "I learned the hard way," she said in an interview months later. "Every elderly person I care for now, I remember Mrs. Patterson and how I failed her." Marcus Henley sold all his businesses and moved to another state. He never recovered financially from the Fusion Eats fiasco, but said in an interview that the experience had fundamentally changed him. "I thought modernity meant forgetting the past," he said. "I learned that modernity should mean honoring the past as we build the future." On the first anniversary of Eleanor's death in September 2025, the Ben and Ellie's Memorial Center organized a special event. Michael Patterson had donated the original recipe for the strawberry milkshake to the center, and they hired a local chef to prepare the drink exactly as Eleanor had made it. More than 1,000 people showed up to sample Eleanor's famous milkshake. Each person received a small plastic strawberry pin as a souvenir, a replica of the original Benjamin had given Eleanor in 1954. "It tastes just like I remember," said Margaret Thompson, now 79, savoring the milkshake with tears in her eyes. Sweet, creamy, but mostly made with love. The story of Eleanor Patterson had become a modern American legend about respect, memory, and the consequences of ignoring the wisdom of the elderly. Books were written, documentaries were produced, and universities began using her case as a study on ageism and historical preservation.